Hello and welcome to Birthright Ballads, a podcast about folk song and memory. I'm Jamie Cook, and today's episode is about cuckoo songs, scientific misunderstandings, and luck. Oh, the cuckoo is a pretty bird, she sings as she flies. She brings us glad tidings, she tells us no lies. She sucketh white flower for to keep her voice clear. She never sings cuckoo till summer it draws near. A bird takes flight. It is early April, and something in her bones has told her it is time to leave her home in sub-Saharan Africa and travel north. The clouds are building in the west, and soon the rainy season will be here. She flies mostly by night, keeping cool and taking advantage of the prevailing winds. Her route takes her up the coast and over the countries of West Africa, Cameroon, Nigeria, Ghana. The great expanse of the Sahara Desert lies ahead of her, stretching almost 800 miles north to Morocco and the Mediterranean. She will aim to cross this vast distance in a single continuous flight that will take her about 60 hours to complete. A short rest in the Atlas Mountains, and then on, across the sea and into Spain, over France, Belgium, England. Every single country she crosses calls her by some variant of the same name, an onomatopoeic name, mimicking the obvious song, although she herself does not sing this song. Only the males of her species will ever say the word cuckoo. At last she reaches her destination, a remote heathery mountainside in the Scottish Highlands, some 4,000 miles from where she began. And there she stops and she listens. She listens for the distinctive sound that gives her her name, those two mournful notes, a descending minor third, that tell her if the males have arrived yet. The whole journey has taken her 10 days, and she knows there are more like her on their way. Late April is a time for feeding and for breeding. The abundance of bugs and flies, worms and caterpillars gives her plenty to restore her energy after her long flight. The courtship begins as soon as the males find her. May. The air is warm. The male's song has changed now. The melancholy of the minor has become a descending major third, a rejoicing cry as couples dance through the air together, displaying their plumage in all its pride. While other smaller birds are busy assembling nests for their upcoming clutches, she watches secretly. When her own time comes, she flies screeching and silhouetted over the landscape, the black and white striped bars on her belly mimicking those of a sparrowhawk, terrorizing the smaller birds and scaring them away from their nests. Hastily, she selects a nest, a warbler's, and descends. It is already filled with the other bird's eggs, and in a flash she knocks one tumbling and smashed to the ground below, and quickly lays her own egg in its place. She is a brood parasite. The trick is risky, it's a gamble, and it doesn't always pay off. She will repeat the ritual up to 20 times over the following month, selecting a different nest as a target each time. Often the trick fails. The returning host sees the invasion and pushes her egg out in retaliation. Most of them fail, but she only needs one to succeed. June drawing into July. The males are becoming desperate now, their cheery courtship cry morphing into a ragged, robotic perfect fourth, increasing in tempo and frequency as they plead for a mate. But her work is complete here, and while the males may wait another month for late arrivals, she feels the pull of the long journey back south, across Europe, the Straits of Gibraltar, the Sahara, and back to her African home. It is not her job to raise her young. It is the job of the warbler now, in whose nest she has unsuspectingly left her young.
Oh, I wish I was stronger and could handle the pain. I would write to my false love and to all roving men. I would tell them of the grief and woe that had turned on their lives. I would bid them have pity on the flower when it dies. Oh, the cuckoo is a pretty bird. She sings as she flies. She brings us glad tidings. She tells us no lies. She flies the hills over. She flies the skies above. She flies back to the mountain in mourn of her love.
When I was a kid, we had a gooseberry bush in our garden. In summer, when I'd get sent out to go see if the gooseberries were ready to pick, I always remember seeing this sticky, foamy white stuff in the crook of the leaves where they met the stem of the plant. I always knew this as cuckoo spit. Now at that point, I'd never seen a cuckoo. They're actually quite difficult to spot, but it made perfect sense to child me that when I wasn't looking, the cuckoo would fly over and spit on our gooseberry bush. The clue's in the name. I mean, where else would it come from? Sometimes I'd poke around in the cuckoo spit and usually find a tiny greenish-brown insect hiding inside, a froghopper, and think, what a coincidence that the cuckoo's spit landed on this little bug. Lots of things are named after other things. Froghoppers jump like a frog. The origin of why gooseberries are associated with geese is apparently unknown, but I did recently learn that the word in French translates to mackerelberry because they're often served with mackerel. That sounds yummy. In Italian, it translates to spiky grape. Sure, it's not a grape, but I can get behind that. This makes sense to me. What doesn't make sense to me is cuckoo spit. In 1859, French scientist Louis Pasteur, that's right, the one who gave his name to the process of pasteurization, he conducted an experiment to try to disprove the theory of spontaneous generation. Proponents of spontaneous generation held that life was able to appear either out of nothing or that life could grow out of other unrelated life forms. To go back to geese for a moment, a classic well-known example of this is the confusion of the barnacle goose and the goose barnacle. The reason that these two entirely different creatures, one a bird and the other a shellfish, have such similar names is that they used to be considered, well, the same animal. Now, to our modern minds this seems crazy, absolutely ridiculous, but one has to remember that until fairly recently in history, bird migration routes were not well understood. Where did the geese come from in spring? The sea, of course. And where did they go to in the autumn? Back into the sea, obviously. Rather coincidentally, the goose barnacle, that's the shellfish, shares an uncanny resemblance in shape and colour to the barnacle goose, that's the bird. Not only that, but because the barnacles were often found attached to driftwood, it figured that they must actually grow on trees, right? There are some wonderful medieval illustrations of this process that I really encourage you to go look up. To many medieval people in Europe, it was so obvious that these were one and the same animal that it was even permitted to eat barnacle geese on religious feast days when other meat was forbidden. I mean, this bird isn't meat, it's just a fish that grows on a tree, right? So back to Louis Pasteur. Whilst some of the more out-there beliefs like this had declined, many people still believed in spontaneous generation enough to know that maggots were created from rotting meat, fleas were born out of dust, or mice were made in heavy rainstorms. Pasteur conducted a simple experiment by boiling 2 swan neck flasks of meat broth, such that the shape of the flasks allowed the steam to escape, but created an airtight seal once cooled. He then took the lid off just one of the flasks and left them both for a few days. The one with the lid off began to grow mould, whereas the one that was sealed did not, thus suggesting that the mouldy life forms did not generate from nothing, but were in fact airborne spores that fell into the open flask. This may seem obvious to us, but at the time it was so groundbreaking that the French Academy of Sciences awarded him 2,500 francs, that's about £10,000 in today's money, and it sparked a new scientific interest in what was termed biogenesis, the notion that life only emerges from existing and related life. Last summer, I spent a month in Italy, volunteering on a little farmstead in very rural Tuscany. It was dreamy. I have long heard European friends of mine say that there is no surer sound of summer than the droning, pulsing beat of cicadas, and I have to agree that I love it. One night, as we were sat out in the yard watching the stars and listening to the screeching insects, my host said to me, "You know, when I was a child, we used to say that cicadas were born of cuckoo spit." I look it up. In the 7th century, Isidore of Seville, archbishop, historian, and scholar, wrote, "The cuckoo is named for its particular call. These birds have a season for their migration, at which time they are taken up on the shoulders of kites, lest their strength fail, fatigued by the long expanse of sky. Cicadas are born from their saliva." I don't know how Isidore's understanding of cuckoos has been carried through 1,400 years into the childish imaginings of my Tuscan host, but it pleases me tremendously.
Pretty bird, she warbles as she flies, and she never sings cuckoo till the 4th day of July. I'm gonna build me a log cabin on a mountain so high, so I can see Willie as he goes on by.
There is something of the same fitness in man's building his own house as there is in a bird building its own nest. Who knows, but if men constructed their dwellings with their own hands, the poetic faculty would be universally developed, as birds universally sing when they are so engaged. But alas, we do as cowbirds and cuckoos, which lay their eggs in nests which other birds have built, and cheer no traveller with their chattering and unmusical notes. Henry David Thoreau wrote these words in 1854, and I was struck by them when I first read them. Whilst a little unfair to the poor, unmusical cuckoo, it got me thinking about poetic faculty, as Thoreau puts it, and my own home life. Now, I've never built my own house. Living in rented accommodation my whole adult life, I've often struggled even to build a home. The rental market feels like the Wild West sometimes. Lawless, unregulated, a take-your-chances sort of environment. You just have to get lucky. Thoreau was part of the transcendentalist movement of the early 19th century, a philosophical and literary movement that claimed that people's inherent goodness had been corrupted by society and institutions. Individual freedom is at the heart of the philosophy, and the transcendentalists believed that people are at their best when they are independent and self-reliant. That quote about the house building and the unmusical cuckoo is from Walden, an account of Thoreau's 2-year spell living self-sufficiently at Walden Pond in Massachusetts. During the course of those 2 years, he built his own home, grew his own crops, he wrote and studied the nature around him, developing his own poetic faculty, meticulously recording plant life, wildlife, the trees and the movements of the water. Sometimes I dream of a cabin in the woods, something that's all mine, that no one can take away from me. I don't think this is an unusual desire. I think it's natural to pine for a little more control in life when things feel out of control. In the 13 years I've been living in rented accommodation, the countless houses I've inhabited, I have met one of my landlords. In my experience, generally they are an unknown, faceless entity with whom my only interaction is that once a month I give them all of my money in return for usually poor quality housing over which I have little control. For me, landlords do themselves no favours in perpetuating my belief that they are probably evil. I'm not a transcendentalist. I do try to believe in the inherent goodness of people, but it can be hard when faced with the fact that some choose to harness their individual freedoms to exploit others who have less than them. Maybe I'm missing the point. Maybe these people have inherent goodness deep down, and it's this society that has corrupted them. But nonetheless, I struggle to feel much sympathy for landlords. Like, in 2022, I was renting a tatty old council house in the centre of Edinburgh for much more than it was worth. The landlady didn't want to pay for an HMO licence, something that landlords are required to do by law in certain rented properties in Scotland, so we had to lie about how many people lived there. On a week when we all happened to be away, a water pipe burst, flooding the kitchen and damaging the walls. When the plumber came round to inspect the mess, he found that it had been slowly leaking for months and the inside of the wall was rotten. It was really quite disgusting. On top of this, he said that it would be impossible to repair in its current state, as it turned out the flat was full of asbestos, something apparently the landlady knew about but had failed to mention to us. He said that for all our safety, he would recommend to the landlady that we vacate the property at once. She, however, told us not to worry, that we could wash ourselves, our pots and pans, and all of our clothes in the bathtub. The kitchen would be out of bounds, but we could buy a camping stove with which to cook in the flat. Just remember to open a window because the carbon monoxide alarm is obviously broken and she hasn't found time in the last few months to bother replacing it. A rent reduction was out of the question, but by way of apology, she could offer us a £20 Amazon gift voucher that her daughter had given her for Christmas. Oh, how grateful we should be for her kindness and generosity. We moved out immediately.
Oh, the cuckoo's a deceitful bird. She sings only in summer, and she flies free while her young dwell in the nest of another. She mocks us as she flies with her untuneful notes, singing one man's life of ease is another man's load.
In a different flat, where, again, the landlord didn't want to fork out for an HMO licence and make the property comply to legal standards, instead they asked my two flatmates to pretend they were in a relationship when the inspector came round, as, for some crazy reason, the same rules on living conditions don't apply to families and couples. Last year, a friend of mine came home on the afternoon of New Year's Eve to find that his landlady had promised a group of her friends that they could have his flat for a party. She'd neglected to mention any of this to my friend, and he was locked out of his own home all night and had to sleep in his car. What a lovely start to the year. I have sublet rooms from people who no longer and will never again live in my house, because under landlords' crooked contracts, if one person leaves, then everyone in the house becomes homeless and has to start again. I have pretended to be people I am not when talking to estate agents under the advice of landlords trying to skirt around contract law. I have paid extortionate amounts to live in shoddy student housing practically made of cardboard beside a 6-lane wide main road where twice a week we had to file outside at 3 a.m. because somebody was smoking in their room and had set off the fire alarm. This isn't a home, this is human storage. I've had friends with families of young children kicked out of their home at short notice because the landlord decided that they weren't worth his time or money. It's like we're all expected to bow down and be grateful to the almighty landlord god for allowing us to live in these shitty situations. It's like they forget that we pay their mortgages every month. Yes, of course I dream of that cabin in the woods, where I have control. Contrary to what Thoreau suggests, I actually sympathise with the cuckoo. She never gets to build her own nest. She is hatched into rented accommodation. Sure, if she makes it that far, then she's generally lucky, but many other times her host will simply push her out of the nest. She is entirely at the whim of her landlord. She is not in control. Her survival is pure luck. Who knows, but her poetic faculty could be so universally developed, just as humans universally sing as they paint the walls of their first house. But alas, she does like the poor renter who lives in homes constructed by another and cheers no one with her cold and mournful notes.
There is something of the same craft in building a house as there is in the songbird as she built her nest. Who knows, but if we did, what music we'd make, as the songbirds do sing when so engaged. And if I repent of one thing, 'tis I only got work for my pains. Oh, I only got work for my pains. But we dwell in strange houses built by others' hands, and we work, if we're lucky, on another man's land. We do as cowbirds and cuckoos, born homeless and poor, and cheer no traveller with our mournful call. And if I repent of one thing, 'tis I only got work for my pain. Oh, I only got work for my pain.
The cuckoo, it seems to me, is a bit of a shapeshifter. According to folk songs, she is so many things. So much so that I wonder sometimes if folk music is a bit confused about cuckoos. I certainly am. The cuckoo is a pretty bird. She's a lucky bird. She's a gambler. She's a bringer of good tidings. She's lonely, homeless, mournful. She's a thief, and she plays tricks. Spring 2024, I was in a bit of a confused place. A year previously, I'd been off gallivanting around Australia, posing for selfies with kangaroos, eating Tim Tams, surfing in warm seas, and all the other typically I'm a traveller in Australia for the first time things that one does. A year later, I was back in Scotland, where I've lived for 13 years, temporarily homeless, just having moved out of a chaotic rental flat, and about to move into another just as chaotic. I was stressed with uni, stressed with work, confused in my love life, and to top it off, the weather was even more abysmal than normal. I felt kinda lonely. One evening, I was hanging out with a friend, complaining of feeling overwhelmed and worrying about how I'd manage my summer, when he gave me some useful advice. He told me to pick just one single, simple thing to focus on. If at the end of the year you looked back on this summer, what one thing would make you feel proud of yourself? He asked me. The answer spilled out of me so quickly, I didn't really have time to question it. I want to climb a load of classic Scottish rock climbs. Well, there you go, he said. That's what you're going to do. And so I did. Me and my friend Andrew, we got his mum's beat-up old car and we disappeared north for a month, the sole aim of the trip, to follow the weather and touch rock. I say touch rock because really that's what climbing is. For me, it's not always about doing the hardest thing, climbing the highest or the fastest or the most dangerous. Sure, those things are exhilarating. But I think people mistake climbing as an adrenaline sport, when often it's the opposite. It's a sport of focus and delicacy, and most of all, slowing down. Nothing makes you scrutinise a crease of rock, an errant pebble, or a minute quartz crystal with greater focus and detail than when you're balancing on it 200 feet in the air, way above your last bit of gear that you're not wholly convinced would catch you if you fell anyway. You move slowly, you breathe deeply, you study the rock diligently. Climbing is a weird mix of concentration and strength and a fair bit of luck. You stir them together and you hope it pays off. I love being out in nature. I love hiking to the summits. I love gazing upon a vast sea view. I love cycling fast down country lanes. One thing I found about all these activities, however, is they're macroscopic. They place me in a great big landscape and they make me feel small. I look down from the top of a mountain and I think, wow, how big the world is. When I'm climbing, I'm tuned into the microscopic. I run my fingertips over fine edges, poke them into little cracks, and think, wow, how small the world is. I try to remember this feeling in my normal life. When I'm hyper-focused and spiraling in anxiety over a piece of work, I try to zoom out. I try to imagine I'm on top of a mountain and my problems are tiny, insignificant, and surmountable. When I lack focus and I'm overwhelmed by the sheer number of things mounting up in my life, I zoom in. I try to imagine I'm climbing a rock face. This single task is important, and absolutely nothing else matters right now other than moving up the rock. Everything else can wait. One thing at a time.
Oh, the cuckoo is a pretty bird, warbles as she flies by your windows to her. Cover your eyes, let nothing come between you. Hold her in your sights, keep a close watch. Don't turn out the light.
There's a superstition that says it's good luck to hear a cuckoo on your right, but to hear a cuckoo on your left is a bad sign. What I like about this is it gives you a choice. Don't like what you hear? Turn your head the other way. This particular summer, this trip, the sound of cuckoos followed me everywhere. That beautiful echoing call is a classic sign of British summer. Everybody knows what they sound like, but they're surprisingly difficult to spot. An odd-looking bird, and somewhat elusive, easy to mistake for a pigeon or a dove. My friend and I were hiking up a steep mountain in the northwest of Scotland called Cullbeg, and I was musing on the fact that I was not sure if I'd ever actually seen a cuckoo. As if summoned by that announcement, not one, but a pair of cuckoos flew over us, dancing together and landing on a boulder ahead. They were unmistakable, their tails shaking from side to side, the bars on their bellies visible against the grey and purple heather. Most tellingly, the male said, "Cuckoo." We faced the path ahead, turning the cuckoos on our right. Lucky. I've always considered myself a lucky person. Not because I believe in superstition, but because the alternative is a bit too miserable to consider. Nothing ever good came to anyone who thought they were unlucky. I think luck is a shortcut word for allowing yourself to be observant, to place yourself in an environment where you're likely to encounter the things that you want to encounter, and to expect to find them there. It was lucky of me to see a cuckoo in that moment. The luck is not diminished by the fact that I'd chosen to go walking in cuckoo country at a time of year when cuckoos are here and at their most active, with a friend who loves to spot wildlife. I notice the times I am lucky, and I choose to remember them. One morning in Glen Etive, after a night of camping in temperatures that sank to 1 degree, we decided to climb a route ominously named the Chasm. 600 metres of soggy, slimy, crumbly ravine that winds steeply up the side of Buccleuch Moor. This is probably the stupidest climb I've ever done, and I still can't decide if I hated it or loved it. About a quarter of the way up, I soloed a long section of dripping wet wall over a mass of intimidatingly jagged rocks below, unable to find anywhere to place protection. I've thought about that 15 metres of climbing so many times since, and it horrifies me how dangerous it was, how I risked such a big, bad fall, how I didn't know what I was facing ahead. But I didn't fall. I topped out into the next section of the ravine, set up an anchor, and brought my friend up on a rope. I placed a bet, and this time it paid off. 30 minutes later, we were lost. Following a confusingly written description, struggling to read the route, we were searching for any bit of rock that looked passable. Frustrated, we picked an unlikely-looking line, placed our bets, and went for it. On this vertical section of wall, I slipped on some damp moss, and this time I did fall. The one piece of gear I had in to protect me below was poorly placed in a muddy crack, and it ripped out of the rock immediately. I hit the ground hard, flat on my back, and I just lay there shocked. Climbing is mad, and it felt like this place was playing tricks on us. Despite the fall, I got lucky this time, escaping with little more than a bruised wrist and ankle. I thanked the cuckoo for this luck. I thanked myself for placing the cuckoo on my right, and I reminded myself that sometimes luck is choosing to be observant of your surroundings and putting yourself in the right place. The chasm had chewed us up and spat us back out. We bailed out of it and trudged back down to the car in the rain. In that moment, the right place was the pub.
Jack of diamonds is a hard card to play. You've robbed my poor pockets and left me to beg. 'Cause I played cards in England, I played cards in Spain. I bet you $10 I'll beat you at the next game.
A cuckoo chick hatches. This one has been lucky. She hatched a day or two earlier than the other eggs in her nest. Despite being only hours old, she understands the competition for food and begins to push the other eggs from the nest, just as her mother had done 12 days previously to make room for her. She will never meet her mother, but like her, she is an excellent mimic. Not only can she copy the individual sounds of other bird species, but she can make the sound of a whole brood of chicks. This confuses her host parents, despite her already much larger appearance than her host, and despite there being only one of her, they feed her as if she is an entire, chattering, clamouring, hungry nestful. Late August. After several weeks of being fed by her host, it is time for her to fledge. The skies in Scotland are already beginning to change. She needs to find a warmer climate. She's not sure how, but she knows the route already. It's in her bones. Other birds are heading that way too. She takes one last look at her rented home, and then she takes flight. She is only a few months old.
Oh, the cuckoo is a fine bird. She sings as she flies. She tells us good tidings. She tells us no lies. She sucks little birds' eggs to keep her voice clear. And she never sings cuckoo till the summer draws near. Oh, a meeting is a pleasure, a parting is a grief. An inconstant lover is worse than a thief. A thief can but rob you of all that you have. Oh, but an inconstant lover will drag you to the grave. Oh, the hours that I've spent in the arms of my dear can never be thought of without shedding some tears. Oh, hardship there I could cheerfully bear. Forgive all your worries, forget all your cares. You know, I think that there's loads of songs about the cuckoo, but that one gets the sadness right.
That was beautiful. Yeah. Did you know that that I have an entire episode on Cuckoo Songs?
I did not.
There you go. Thanks for listening to Birthright Ballads, which was written and produced by me, Jamie Cook. This episode you've also heard music from the wonderful Rosie H. Sullivan and Mark Borthwick. My thanks to both of them. If you'd like to hear the full songs and more of the music from this series, then you can find all of the tracks on Bandcamp at birthrightballads.bandcamp.com. Please tell your friends if you've enjoyed the podcast. Word of mouth is the best way to share things around. And if you want to get in touch to say hi or with comments or episode suggestions, I'd genuinely love to hear from you. You can find us on Instagram at Birthright Ballads. And finally, this podcast is free for all to enjoy. But if you want to support the podcast, then you can go to patreon.com/birthrightballads and buy me a coffee if you so wish. Any amount is appreciated. Thanks again, and see you next time.